Good morning from a sunny but not quite so warm garden today. Psalm 126 says, "When the Lord turned again the captivity of Zion, we were like those who dreamed." Why is this psalm one of the psalms of ascents? And what on earth does it mean to us today? I invite you to step into the shed with me and we'll take a look at that. Well, so hi there. I guess we could start by reading the psalm. Psalm 126. When the Lord brought back the captivity of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with singing. Then they said among the nations, "The Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are glad. Bring back our captivity, O Lord, as the streams in the south. Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy. He who goes continually forth, weeping, bearing seed for sowing, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him." So this is one of the songs of ascents. And, when I talk about ascents, I guess, a quick way of defining that would be the consciousness of the presence of God. Not just a belief in the presence of God, not just faith in the presence of God, but actually a conscious awareness of the presence of God. That this is something that God is speaking to his church right now to grow in greater measure in the consciousness of his presence. In fact, this is one of the things that is most powerful about lockdown, that we can grow in this time when we have time for reflection, for meditation, for worship, that we can grow in the conscious awareness of the presence of God. Wow. Okay, so this particular psalm, Psalm 126, most of the commentators, in fact, nearly all the commentators that I've read, apply that to the Babylonian captivity. And it's interesting that is a historical time, which was maybe 500 years, give or take, from the time of David in the future. So this is a psalm that is set among the songs of ascents, many of which are attributed to David or Solomon's era. But this one comes from much, much later. So why is it included in the psalms that are specifically addressed towards, for us, becoming more conscious of the presence of God? Why is that? So, one of the themes that I've been with for the last couple of days is the culture in which we live. And that is very interesting in relation to the captivity of the Jews in Babylon, because they were taken away in chains. So they were taken away as prisoners, and then they were released in Babylon, many, many hundreds of kilometers away from Jerusalem. out of their land, out of their home, out of the provision that God had made for them. But and it lasted for 70 years. So there was a whole generation that actually grew up in captivity. But here's the thing, they didn't need chains to keep them there. These were kids who grew up far from Jerusalem. And so normal for them was Babylon. And in a way, that's very much like the culture in which we live, because we weren't taken forcibly away from the presence of God, from the consciousness of the presence of God. We just grew up in a culture where that doesn't exist. We grew up in a culture where the principles of God's kingdom had possibly just lip service, but there wasn't really a reality of the principles of God's kingdom in the culture. And so we learned how to function within that culture. And I described that a couple of days ago as an oppositional culture, a culture that is so focused on self and the promotion of self, that we spend our lives in this, let's put it this way, the name of the game in the culture that we grow up in is how to manipulate people and events, how to manage people, how to control circumstances so that my agenda is served, so that my significance is enhanced, so that my position is unassailable. And this is the norm. This is how we grew up. This is how the world around us lives. And this is captivity. So when the time came around, for the Jews to be brought back to their own land, it was only a very small percentage of them opted to go. They left their land in chains. But it didn't need chains to prevent them from coming back. Anybody who wanted to come back to the land could come back. But many didn't, because they lived in captivity, which was their own normal. They thought, well, it's not so bad here. All the way back to Jerusalem, what's there? There's nothing there. It's a ruined city. Why? And so they were happy to stay in captivity, but now it was captivity of their own making. And what a wonderful thing, that the captivity of the culture that we live in is only a captivity of our own making. You see that we have been called to ascend. We have been called to know the presence of God, and therefore to have the life of God in our hearts, so that we may live free according to his definition of free, not ours. Come on. And so he says, where did that go? Okay. So how does this happen? And there's a principle here that is to me, it's the lesson of this psalm as we seek to know the presence of God, to be conscious, aware of the presence of God at a greater level than ever in our lives. It says, those who sow in tears shall reap in joy. He who continually goes forth weeping, bearing seed for sowing, shall, without a doubt, come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. This is the principle of escape from captivity of our culture. sowing in tears shall reap in joy. It says, he who goes forth continually weeping, bearing seed for sowing. Because when he went out to sow the seed, what he was doing was he was taking the food off the table. That's what the seed was. It was always a critical calculation to make. How much seed can I put into the ground without starving? Because that's what the seed was. It was both the future harvest, but it was the food on the table now. And so there was a calculation to be made. And so he had to take the food off the table and scatter it in the field. And that is for us to do with the means and methods of the culture in which we live. We have to sow that into death. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, that has to go down into death. And we can do that. If we value consciousness of the presence of Jesus, then this is one of the things that we have to turn loose of. And that can be difficult because it's hidden from our own hearts, because the culture in which we live in many ways is normal for us. So the whole thing of manipulating people, managing circumstances to our advantage, controlling circumstances, even controlling people, we have to turn loose of that and embrace what we find as we are conscious of the presence of God, because he will build into us new ways, new principles, but it will be scary because we are cashing in the methods of our culture and we are embracing brand new methods that are quite countercultural. Yet the promise is, he shall doubtless come again with rejoicing. We will find that God's ways are more productive ways, are more fruitful ways, are more joyful ways, are more gracious ways, are more wonderful ways. And he will come bearing his sheaves with him. Yes, sir, you will find the consequences of giving your life into the consciousness of the presence of God. It will bear fruit in your life. That's the message that I believe I've got for today. And I just pray that God blesses it to you and that you begin to increase in your consciousness of his presence as you worship and as you feast on the word. I just pray that blessing over you. God bless you all, and may you receive much in this, in Jesus' mighty, mighty, mighty name. Amen.